Okay, so welcome to Eat, Move, Think, the show about optimal wellness brought to you by Medcan.
Wow. Do it again.
Oh, I was practicing. Okay, ready?
Welcome
to Eat, Move, Think,
the show about
optimal
wellness brought to you by Medcan.
Yeah, this is extremely good. Thank you.
For the second week in a row, we're tackling a women's preventive health topic.
Yes. Woohoo! Girl power. This one is all about nutrition. Chris, have you ever heard that soy is bad for women and their hormones?
Yeah, I looked into that because I have a daughter who's a vegetarian.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things this episode will be tackling. That's a really big misconception about women's health and women's nutrition. This episode is all about women's nutrition.
Do women need less iron or more iron than men?
Do they need certain supplements when they're pregnant versus not pregnant?
What about calcium needs for bone health over time?
Yeah, it can be hard to find information about women's specific nutritional needs, and we tried our best to get you everything you need to know in this episode.
Hi, I'm Chris.
I'm Jazz. We're the producers of Eat, Move, Think. And today's episode, Allison Hazell, Medcan's Director of Clinical Innovation, is hosting a conversation
with Leslie Beck, the Medcan's Director of Food and Nutrition,
and registered dietitian Joanna Stochla. One of the things I really love about this episode is the way that Allison Hazell guides the dietitians through the various decades of a woman's life. So whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, or beyond, there is a segment of this episode that is focused strictly on your needs right now.
And if you want to skip forward to that, on the webpage, we'll have time-coded insights, and you can find exactly where in the episode your decade comes up.
Exactly.
In a conversation with Medcan's registered dietitians, Leslie Beck and Joanna Stochla, here's Allison Hazell.
Hello, Eat, Move, Think listeners. I'm Allison Hazell, Medcan's Director of Clinical Innovation. Welcome to a very special episode of Eat, Move, Think. As we approach International Women's Day, we're devoting this show to an exploration of nutrition for women. So specifically, we're going to be talking about things like whether women have different dietary needs than men, and if so, why? How do women's dietary needs change throughout life? And are there food choices that we can make that can ease some of life's changes, such as menopause? So to answer these questions and more, I'm joined by Medcan's Director of Food and Nutrition, Leslie Beck. Hi, Leslie. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
And we also have Medcan registered dietitian Joanna Stochla with us today. Hi, Joanna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, well, thank you both for being here. I thought we could get started by talking a bit about why women might have unique nutritional needs. What exactly is it about our bodies that requires us to have different nutritional requirements than men? Leslie, do you want to take this one?
Sure. And you're right. There are some notable differences between men and women when it comes to nutrient requirements. And that's largely due to differences in male and female hormones. So for example, menstruation increases a woman's daily need for iron. And thanks to testosterone, men have more muscle mass and higher metabolic rates than women do. And that increases their requirements for protein, many different B vitamins, and zinc as well. And of course, nutrient requirements change as we get older, in large part, again, because of changing hormones. So with the loss of estrogen that occurs with menopause, women's calcium requirements increase from 1,000 milligrams a day to 1,200 milligrams, whereas men's calcium requirements don't increase until after age 70. It's really important that we tailor our food intake to match our unique nutritional needs. And that's important to help maintain proper immune function, to prevent bone and muscle loss, keep our eyes healthy as we age, and of course, to keep our brains healthy too.
That's helpful. I like that kind of setting the stage. And I think one of the ways that I think it would be helpful to consider this and learn about the differences on a more specific level would be to consider how this changes throughout your lifetime. So I was hoping maybe we could look at that depending on age, starting with the 20s. That's often the time that women realize that kind of what you eat and when you eat and how you eat all affect sort of how you feel on a daily basis. And so what should women in their 20s be considering when they're thinking about making healthy food choices? Joanna, you want to tackle this?
Lots to consider. Yes, definitely. Females in their 20s who are menstruating should pay close attention to iron-rich foods, since at the beginning of the menstrual cycle, the body loses iron as blood is shed from the lining of the uterus. Iron deficiency without anemia has been shown to cause a reversible reduction in energy levels, exercise capacity, and even cognitive function. So food sources such as shellfish, meat, poultry, and eggs contain heme iron, which is the most efficiently absorbed form of iron. Iron-rich vegetable sources like lentils, chickpeas, seeds, some whole grains like quinoa or leafy greens, fortified cereals, they contain something called non-heme iron, which is not as well absorbed as iron in the animal products, but there are some ways to enhance its absorption. For example, foods rich in vitamin C help to increase the absorption of iron in plant foods. Some vegetables, such as spinach, are high in oxalates, which prevent iron absorption. But this can be diminished with vitamin C. So in a spinach salad, add strawberries or mandarin oranges to boost the absorption of iron in spinach. Leslie, is there anything that you would add for women in their 20s?
Yeah, well, great conversation about iron, because you're right, that is so important. And, in light of International Women's Day, I think it's important to note that iron deficiency is the most common nutrient deficiency in the world, with women and young kids being affected the most. So it's really, really important. And in terms of how much, women who are menstruating need to consume 18 milligrams of iron each day from their diet and or supplements. And after menopause, iron requirements decrease to 8 milligrams a day. And of course, in pregnancy, women need generally 27 milligrams a day. And if you eat a plant-based diet, a vegetarian diet, a vegan diet, then women need more iron as well to account for that poorer absorption of iron from foods.
And so 18 milligrams, what is that in terms of food?
Well, it can be really challenging for women who are menstruating to get 18 milligrams from food when you consider that one of the very best sources of heme iron, as Joanna said, is lean beef. 3 ounces of beef has about 3 milligrams of iron. So it can be challenging. And that's perhaps one of the contributing factors to this being such a common nutrient deficiency. So that's why I generally recommend that menstruating women just take a broad-based multivitamin mineral supplement each day. And multivitamins that are targeted at women, premenopausal women that is, usually have a little bit more iron. That's the main difference. They have more iron than multivitamins that are targeted at men or women over the age of 50. So it just helps women get a little bit more.
Well, that's interesting. I've always wondered what the difference is between the male versus female marketed multivitamins. So it's good to know that it's not just a marketing thing, and there's actually differences in there.
And after age 50, multivitamins that are targeted towards females, not all of them, but some of them do contain more calcium, like 200 or 300 milligrams per multivitamin, which is 300 milligrams is basically the amount of calcium that's in 8 ounces of milk or 3/4 of a cup of yogurt kind of thing. But while we're on the 20s, I think that's something else that is important to consider. Females and males, for that matter, continue to build bone into their mid-20s, although they do so at a slower rate than when they were younger. And most people reach their peak bone mass by the age of 30. And once you reach your peak bone mass, your bones are as dense as they're ever going to be. A person's peak bone mass it's pretty much determined by genetics, but nutrition, their lifestyle factors like exercise, for example, can determine whether or not you will achieve your genetically programmed peak bone mass. So calcium is important as well to be considering in your 20s. And that doing so can help prevent osteoporosis and fractures down the road. So men and women in their 20s need 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. In food terms, that's the equivalent of consuming about 3 milk or milk alternative servings a day. So whether that's, 250 milliliters of milk or a calcium fortified plant beverage, 3/4 of a cup of yogurt, 1.5 ounces of cheese. But there are other ways to get it too if you don't consume that much. Other good sources would be canned salmon with the bones, firm tofu, if you see calcium on the ingredient list, tahini, almonds, almond butter, and certain green vegetables are good sources too. Spinach, collard greens, rapini, and bok choy are probably your top sources for calcium.
Interesting. While we're on the 20s, before we move to the 30s, are there any foods that can kind of help mitigate PMS symptoms specifically?
There are. In fact, another benefit of consuming enough calcium is that it has been associated with reduced PMS or premenstrual syndrome, which many females in their 20s suffer from. And it's usually caused by the hormonal changes brought on by the menstrual cycle. Some common signs and symptoms are mood swings, food cravings, irritability, fatigue, or bloating, which typically start 1 to 2 weeks before menstruation. Leslie, do you have any other recommendations that you incorporate for your clients?
You're right, Joanna. I mean, calcium has been shown to ease overall PMS symptoms and some specific ones as well. But I would also say if you do experience PMS, I wouldn't recommend following a low carbohydrate diet. In fact, studies have shown that eating a higher carbohydrate diet improves mood and food cravings. Presumably, it does so by increasing the level of serotonin in the brain. And serotonin is a brain chemical that helps regulate mood, digestion, sleep, among many other things. So definitely, if those are some of your symptoms, be sure to include really healthy carbs, be it whole grains, sweet potato, fruit, beans, and lentils in each meal.
Interesting. Is there any truth to the, and maybe it's a myth, I don't know, that when your body is craving something, so around PMS and cravings, that it's related to like some sort of nutrient you need, or is that not accurate?
I don't think that's ever been proven. That definitely is a theory that's out there around food cravings. During PMS, it may be more related to hormones and dipping your blood sugar low, and that can spark cravings for sweets or carbohydrates, which are generally craved the most. But that's the more likely theory. But no, I don't think there's any proof that because you're missing a nutrient that you're going to crave a food that's rich in it.
Okay, so let's move on to the 30s then. Many women in this day and age go through pregnancy in their 30s. We know that women need to focus on key nutrients in this particular phase. Joanna, can you comment on kind of anything related to anything particular or anything conventional wisdom that pregnant women require more calcium and sort of what women should be thinking about in this phase of life?
Definitely. One nutrient in particular that is important for women who are planning to become pregnant is folate. This is a B vitamin found in leafy green vegetables, beans and lentils, citrus. It supports the cell growth and division and is essential for the healthy development of a baby's brain and spinal cord. Taking supplemental folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate, before conception and during pregnancy has been proven to prevent neural tube defects such as spina bifida. So if you are contemplating motherhood, take 400 micrograms of folic acid daily as a supplement at least 3 months before becoming pregnant. And once pregnant, choose a prenatal multivitamin with folic acid and at least 18 milligrams of iron. It is also important to make sure you have sufficient stores of iron before becoming pregnant, since daily iron requirements increase during pregnancy, as Leslie mentioned earlier. That's especially so during the second and third trimesters, when more iron is needed to support the increase in your red blood cells and the growth of your baby. Calcium is another important mineral during pregnancy. As you mentioned, Allison, for women between 19 and 15 years of age, their calcium requirements are 1,000 milligrams per day. And although that number does not increase during pregnancy, it is very important for women who are pregnant to consume enough calcium, which builds the fetus's bones and teeth. If you don't get enough calcium to meet the needs of your growing baby, your body will end up taking calcium from your bones, and this will decrease your bone mass, putting you at a risk for osteoporosis or thinning of bones. Not getting enough calcium can also increase your risk of high blood pressure during pregnancy or decrease the bone mass of your growing baby. Leslie, any other nutrients that come to mind?
I want to highlight that folic acid is an absolute must. First and foremost, whether you are planning to have a child or not, as you said, it absolutely can help prevent spina bifida. So that's really important. And we typically recommend, you said at least 400 micrograms or 0.4 milligrams up to a milligram of folic acid in a multivitamin, taking that, at least 3 months before conception. So that I agree with you. Absolutely. That's important. important. The other nutrient, though, that doesn't really get talked about much around pregnancy is choline. And choline is a vitamin-like nutrient that during pregnancy is needed for proper spinal cord and brain development, like folic acid or folate is. So choline plays a really important role in early brain development. And some, but not all, some studies have found that higher intakes of choline during pregnancy versus lower intakes, that's associated with cognitive benefits in toddlers and young children. And there's also some research to suggest that choline, if you're consuming it 2 to 3 months prior to pregnancy, that could possibly reduce the risk of neural tube defects as well. So our choline requirements do go up when pregnant. So a non-pregnant female needs 425 milligrams of choline each day. And when you're pregnant, you need 450 milligrams. And in breastfeeding, it jumps even higher to 550 milligrams a day. So the very best sources of choline are animal foods, especially eggs. So one large egg yolk has almost 150 milligrams of choline, but beef is a good source. Chicken and salmon are pretty decent sources as well. Milk and yogurt have some, about 40 milligrams per serving. If you eat a plant-based diet, soybeans are great sources as well of choline. So think about tofu, edamame, tempeh even, and then kidney beans, chickpeas, quinoa, shiitake mushrooms are pretty good as well. So there are some other sources as well. So, that's something that we don't talk a lot about, but it is really important.
So if you're taking a multivitamin or a prenatal vitamin, I guess, would you expect to see choline in there, or you need to get that through food?
No, you wouldn't expect to see fine choline in a prenatal vitamin. Some do, but not all. So you need to look. And then there are some separate single supplements of choline that you could look into as well.
Okay, so the 40s. So this is the time when the menopausal transition begins for many females. Are there things we should be considering that we didn't need to consider before our 40s?
Yes. A major consideration for what many women in their 40s, particularly mid 40s, is the start of perimenopause, the time just before menopause, where estrogen levels may fluctuate. And this can lead to some common symptoms. And one in particular that I get asked a lot about is hot flashes. For women who suffer from hot flashes, perhaps avoiding foods and beverages that can trigger or worsen hot flashes, such as caffeinated drinks, alcohol, and spicy foods may be beneficial. Other triggers may include hot weather, feeling stressed, cigarette smoking, or tight clothing. And also adopting a Mediterranean diet rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains may also reduce hot flashes. And some studies also suggest including soy in your diet may be helpful for hot flashes. Soybeans contain isoflavones. These are phytochemicals thought to help reduce hot flashes by weakly binding to estrogen receptors in the body. So foods such as edamame, soybeans, tofu, tempeh, soy nuts, and unsweetened soy milk are all good choices.
Interesting. Basically, are you saying you can use your diet to kind of balance hormones? Is that an accurate way to think about it, or is that inaccurate?
There are so many claims out there that certain diets, certain foods, even certain supplements can reset or rebalance a woman's hormones during perimenopause, and therefore perhaps ease hot flashes, help women sleep better, etc. So you hear this a lot, and we hear it from our clients coming in. I want a diet that's going to balance my hormones. But eating a certain food won't change your hormone levels. The sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they're made from cholesterol in the body through a very complex process. Plus, just because you eat a certain food doesn't mean those nutrients, once it's digested, are going to go directly to make that hormone. It just doesn't work that way. It is true, though, that your hormone levels can be influenced by a rapid weight loss, let's say, or malnutrition, not consuming enough calories. And there is another way your diet could influence hormones as well. Studies have found, recent studies, that eating an overall healthy diet, especially an anti-inflammatory diet that's high in fiber, healthy fats, antioxidant-rich foods, for example, that has been associated with an improved chance of conceiving or becoming pregnant. And so inflammation in the body has been shown to play a really important role in the development of insulin resistance. So when your body doesn't use insulin as well as it used to clear sugar from your bloodstream, that can influence hormonal function and also interfere with ovulation. So it can affect hormones from a fertility perspective.
Well, that's very interesting.
I think this is a time of life too, women are going through the menopausal transition, which can occur over up to a period of 10 years for some women. So yes, you may have symptoms like hot flashes, which is the most common symptom, as Joanna was talking about. You may have sleep disturbances, mood swings, all of those things. But this is a real time for females to be very proactive about their overall diet. As we age, our risk of heart disease increases, our risk of dementia increases, and eating a very healthy diet is so important to help lessen those risks. So this is really a time for women to take stock of their diet, other lifestyle factors, so that they can go into those postmenopausal years as healthy as possible.
One other thing that I hear commonly around menopause or perimenopause is weight management becomes more difficult. And sort of you reach a certain age and your metabolism goes down and you're going to gain a bunch of weight. Is there any truth to that from like a scientific perspective, or where do things sit there?
Yes. It is true that many women experience weight gain during the menopause transition, and many find it harder to lose weight than they did when they were younger. Definitely that is true. And it is true, women become more prone to gaining visceral fat during the transition to menopause, the type of fat that's deep inside the abdomen and, packs around your liver and other organs. So some women do also notice that their waist size starts to increase. And it's really important to do whatever you can to really minimize visceral fat, because it is linked to a greater risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So really important. But interestingly, new research suggests that weight gain for women, or men for that matter, in their 40s and 50s is not actually due to a slowing down of metabolism, which is a very common, it's commonly thought that, menopause means your metabolism is going to tank, and as a result, weight gain is inevitable. We hear it a lot. So this particular study, very fascinating, published in 2021, measured the metabolisms of 6,500 people, infants to 95-year-olds. There were numerous researchers who contributed to this study. They found 4 distinct stages of life when metabolism changes for all people. The researchers expected to see the metabolisms of adults start to slow down in their 40s and for women at the onset of menopause, but they didn't see that at all. What they saw was that from age 20 to 40, metabolism stayed steady. At 60, though, is when it started to decline about 0.7% per year. So these findings suggest that middle-aged weight gain isn't due to a slowing down of metabolism. So what we tell our female clients, or our male clients for that matter, really focus on eating a very healthy diet, getting a mix of aerobic exercise and resistance training. And also, consider other factors that may be related to weight gain, like getting proper sleep, managing stress, for example.
Oh, that's fascinating. So yeah, that's, I think, probably maybe one of the biggest myths out there is that your metabolism. I remember hearing when I turned 35 that when you turn 35, it's like, that day your metabolism is cut in half. Okay, so let's then move on to the 50s and up. As women get older, what happens to our hormones? What nutritional considerations should we take on in our 50s? Leslie, you want to tackle this one?
Sure. I mean, we've mentioned it before, but, at age 51, calcium requirements increase for women to 1,200 milligrams a day, and that's due to declining estrogen. And it's, we're losing its protective effect on our bones. And so, if your diet lacks calcium, like Joanna mentioned during pregnancy, the minerals move from your bones into the bloodstream. And that's where it's needed for, muscle, nerve, and blood vessel function as well. So again, women need to be proactive about bone health. They need to focus on their calcium, which we've talked about. They need to focus on other bone protective foods like leafy greens, which are an excellent source of vitamin K, which is used to make bone tissue, and also make sure their blood level of vitamin D is sufficient from a bone health perspective. I think the other thing that happens is women, as we age, as you approach 60 and older, and men too, we need to eat a little bit more protein than we did when we were younger to help slow down age-related muscle loss. And as we naturally lose a little bit of muscle, we also need to eat fewer calories every day to maintain a healthy weight. So it becomes really important at this time to make the most of those calories by choosing really nutrient-dense foods.
That's helpful, Leslie. And talking about calcium recommendations specifically, 1,200 milligrams seems like a lot of calcium to kind of take in through diet. At what point should women start to consider supplementation versus trying to get all of these requirements from their food? And how do you think about that?
Well, I think all of us, Joanna, right? The message is foods first approach. And then if you need to bridge any dietary gaps, we can consider supplements. And you're right. I mean, Joanna, do you see many female clients getting 1,200 milligrams of calcium through food alone?
No, it's really difficult. And especially since many people also suffer from lactose intolerance. This also naturally happens as we age. It is a lot more difficult just to get it through our calcium-rich food sources.
Yeah, I find that many females fall short on this. So if they do, what I typically recommend is a calcium citrate supplement. They come in doses, 250 to 300 milligrams a day, which mimics the amount of calcium that's in one milk serving or a serving of fortified plant-based milk, for example. And if you need to take more, I think it's important, you need to divide your dose over the course of the day. So if you need to take 2 calcium citrate pills, take one in the morning, one later on. You can take them on an empty stomach or with food. But there has been research to suggest that taking a daily 1,000 milligram calcium supplement on top of getting lots of it from your diet, that may increase the risk of kidney stones and cardiovascular disease. So the jury's not out, but there is that hint from the literature. So I recommend if you need to supplement with calcium, don't take more than 600 milligrams a day. And just keep in mind, there's no reason why you should be getting more calcium than you need every day anyway.
Let's take a minute to talk about brain health. Why should brain health be on a woman's radar? Why should we care about it? Leslie?
Yeah, we should very much care about it. And that's because of nearly 70% of people who have Alzheimer's disease, they're female. And in fact, while yes, women do tend to live longer than men, but they're more vulnerable to conditions that, while not always life-threatening, are very debilitating. So things like cataract, macular degeneration, dementia, for example, those affect females more often and sooner than males. So it's a very important topic to be considering with respect to eating for your brain health.
Interesting.
And we talk about that a lot at Medcan, don't we, Joanna?
Yes. Women can protect their brain health through following something called the MIND diet, which combines aspects of the heart-healthy Mediterranean diet with the blood pressure lowering DASH diet. A few of the brain foods include dark leafy green vegetables, antioxidants from fruits, especially berries, nuts, in particular walnuts, and omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish like salmon or trout, sardines.
Yeah, the MIND diet is really popular with our clients. They want to learn about it at Medcan. It's an eating pattern that has been associated with a slower rate of cognitive decline and a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, even if it's followed only moderately. So you don't have to be perfect at it. Yeah, it's something that we talk about a lot. Joanna, I'm sure you talk about it multiple times a day.
Absolutely. This is definitely the most common topic that clients want to discuss during their nutrition station of their annual health assessment. So curious on what those foods are so we can do our steps to help reduce our risk for Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay. I'm wondering with the MIND diet, is it just something we should all be considering regardless of our age, or is there data to support that something you really need to start doing at a particular age?
I think this is important for women at any age, whether they're in their 20s, 40s, or even their 70s. The MIND diet is not just a diet for brain health, but because it's based off of 2 heart-healthy eating patterns, it's really good to get these habits in now so that we can really optimize our health throughout our aging process. And the MIND diet is also an anti-inflammatory diet, which is also very important to prevent chronic diseases. So anybody at any age should be considering following the MIND diet.
But we also know that even if you start later in life following this type of eating pattern, you will still derive brain benefits from it.
Okay, so what are some of the biggest misconceptions about dietary needs in women that you hear? What do you find yourself correcting most commonly in your clinical encounters? Joanna, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start here. One common misconception that I always hear about is around calcium-rich foods, where many women feel they are meeting their calcium needs through non-dairy beverage alternatives like almond or oat milk. However, not all of these beverages are actually fortified with calcium. So if you consume these products to help you with meeting your calcium needs, just make sure to check the nutrition facts table to see if calcium is added to the product. You'll see that in the daily value under calcium. You'll see a certain percentage, usually it's around 30%, or you'll actually see calcium listed as an ingredient. There's also a common misconception that women can meet their calcium needs through broccoli. However, 1 cup of cooked broccoli only provides women with about 5% of their daily calcium needs. And I still recommend that broccoli should be a staple in anyone's diet. However, it may not be providing the amount of calcium that some may expect. So I would suggest, just as Leslie mentioned earlier, choosing leafy greens like spinach, kale, and bok choy are much more calcium-rich options to consider, providing roughly 15 to 25% of daily calcium needs for women for 1 cup cooked portion.
Okay, so just because a product says milk doesn't mean that it has calcium. Is that accurate?
And I think there's now some new guidelines where even on an oat beverage or almond beverage, it no longer is able to put the word milk on there anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Here's another one that I'm asked regularly. There's this thinking out there that eating soy will cause breast cancer.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And there have been some animal studies in mice when they were exposed to high doses of isoflavones, those compounds Joanna was talking about earlier that are found in soybeans that may help ease hot flashes, that they showed an increased risk of breast cancer. But mice process soy differently, isoflavones differently than people do. And so those same results have not been shown in women. The human studies show that the very mild estrogenic effects of soy seem to either have no effect at all on breast cancer risk or perhaps reduce breast cancer risk. And that may very well be because soy isoflavones can actually block the body's more potent natural estrogens from binding to an estrogen receptor in breast cells. So I would say there's no evidence of harm to women from eating soy. The potential benefits seem to outweigh the risks. And there is some reason to think that some of the traditional soy foods like, tofu, tempeh, edamame may actually be protective. And certainly these are nutritious foods to be adding to your diet. I will say, though, we do advise against soy isoflavone supplements, which contain much higher amounts of isoflavones than natural soy foods.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground and given our listeners so many helpful tips. So thank you both. If you had to pick one thing among the many topics that we've discussed, what would be the most important nutritional consideration that women should take away? And Joanna, I'll let you start with this one.
The most important consideration that all women should have is thinking around incorporating components of the MIND diet. It in all encompasses a very healthy eating pattern that focuses on a lot of antioxidants, high fiber foods that will benefit any women at any age, whether it's for the brain or for the heart.
That's great. And Leslie?
Yeah, I would also say don't lose the forest for the trees. And I guess what I mean by that is focus on your overall diet. That's what really matters when it comes to health and longevity. It's the quality, the variety, the combinations of foods that you eat on a regular basis that matters. And there are multiple ways to eat a high quality diet. Certainly the MIND diet is a fantastic example. There are others too, depending on your preferences and that. So focus on the positive, but think about your whole overall diet.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie and Joanna, for sharing so much helpful information. It's always so great to connect with both of you. I learned a lot, and I know our listeners did as well. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Happy International Women's Day.
Thanks, Allison.
That was Allison Hazell, Medcan's Director of Clinical Innovation.
Medcan Director of Food and Nutrition, Leslie Beck, and Registered Dietitian, Joanna Stochla. Do you have questions on your personal nutrition and the way it might be affecting the rest of your health? Consider booking a consultation with a Medcan dietitian by emailing nutrition@medcan.com.
Follow Medcan on Twitter and Instagram at MedcanLiveWell.
And follow Leslie Beck on Twitter at LeslieBeckRD.
We'll post episode highlights and links, as well as the time codes where you can find your given decade for women's nutrition on our website at eatmovethinkpodcast.com.
Say hello and send us a tip or a suggestion for another women's health episode by emailing us at info@eatmovethinkpodcast.com.
Eat Move Think is produced by Ghost Bureau. Jasmine Ratch is managing producer. Social media and strategy support is from Chantal Gertzen, Andrew Imex, and Emily Bozick. Executive producer is me, Christopher Scholger.
We'll be back soon with a new episode examining the latest in health and wellness. This podcast episode is intended to provide general information about health and wellness only and is not designed or intended to constitute or be used as a substitute for medical advice, treatment, or diagnosis. You should always talk to your Medcan healthcare provider for individual medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment, including your specific health and wellness needs. This podcast is based on the information available at the time of preparation and is only accurate and current as of that date. Source information and recommendations are subject to change based on scientific evidence as it evolves over time. Medcan is not responsible for future changes or updates to the information and recommendations and assumes no obligation to update based on future developments. Reference to or mention of specific treatments or therapies does not constitute or imply a recommendation or endorsement. The links provided within the associated document are to assist the reader with any specific information highlighted. Any third-party links are not endorsed by Medcan.